Hey ladies, it's Mocha Mommy here bringing you another video. And in this video, I want to address some subscriber mail. I'd like to thank the subscriber who sent me this article wanting my viewpoint and opinion. I made a point to read the article, to check the references and sources, to read the Wall Street Journal article that this article was taken from, and as well as observe the content in the Black woman-centered YouTube algorithm about the article. So I just want to bring this into light and into context for you guys to listen to. Here is my question specifically to the Mocha Mommy audience, okay? This is not an indictment on the subscriber who sent me this article because I'm very grateful that she did. But just the question to the Mocha Mommy audience, as you guys have been hearing this subject reverberate around YouTube and social media. Are you viewing this through the lens of the Black experience or through the eyes of the majority culture? Because clearly this is about the majority culture and its impact on the majority culture. How have you, as a Black woman, viewed this article and this information? And how has this changed your perception when it comes to dating and hypergamy? That's what I want to get into in this video. When the majority culture notices a problem on the horizon, they usually take a three-pronged approach, okay? Which is 1, social discourse, 2, systemic change, and 3, a cultural shift. I'm going to give you an example of certain problems that the majority culture has had a social discourse about, where they brought about systemic changes and cultural shifts. And we can use this as an example going forward to why I think that this mating crisis is not as much of an issue as you may think it is. Notice how the majority culture handled the opioid crisis. First, it began with a social discourse, talking about the number of deaths, the impact and cost of on the overall economy. Then there became systemic changes. Systemic changes like making Narcan available over the counter, holding physicians and pharmaceutical companies accountable for their addictive drugs, creating more regulation in the amount of opioids that doctors and dentist offices are able to prescribe. Also, we saw some systemic changes when it came to creating more rehabilitation efforts as opposed to criminal prosecution. And the cultural shift that we saw was kind of painting these people as victims as opposed to demonizing them as addicts. Notice social discourse, systemic change, cultural shift. Reaction and sympathy towards school shootings, the deaths of innocent people in public places like concerts. It brought about some systemic changes, universal background checks, assault weapons bans, limit upon ammunition and its distribution and sale. And also we saw some systemic change on the other side with more liberal gun laws and allowing people to defend themselves in these public places with open carry. So again, there was a social discourse, there was systemic change, and then a cultural shift upon, no matter where you end in the gun control debate, there's a cultural shift where there's going to be a culture that's going to support you no matter what stance you take. Ladies, this is how the majority culture operates. If they're going to talk about the problem, usually it is because systemic change and cultural shifts are coming into play because they're going to do something about the problem. The majority culture does not just talk about the problem, they actually do something about the problem. Notice this article was written by college professor who's employed by a traditional, collegiate, private institution. Now, for many, many years, private, collegiate, educational institutions have been a huge part of our economy. They create these multi-million-dollar sports programs that pump millions of dollars into the economy and are for people's viewing pleasure. They also create these business and alumni networks that create these good old boys clubs that generate lots of money for the economy, and then in turn donate back to those institutions. So basically, the good old boys club needs a couple more boys. So do you think that these private, collegiate, traditional institutions are going to go belly up and bankrupt because of some cultural shifts? The answer to that is no. Many of these private, collegiate, traditional institutions have been standing for hundreds of years, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. There have been some things that have happened in our culture that have affected their overall bottom line, and I'll explain those to you. You see, 10 years ago, we were having these exact same discussions, but it wasn't around traditional 4-year collegiate private institutions. It was around that of the skilled trades. 10 years ago, we were discussing the lack of men in skilled trades, the economic opportunities that it led to for the American economy, and just basically calling a lot of young men to carpet. We had people like Mike Rowe and, if you're Canadian, Mike Holmes being advocates and testifying in front of their government bodies to increase funding and to restructure the way that they were doing student financial aid so that we can educate a new workforce for the growing economy. And in that 10-year period, we saw systemic change, increases in vocational education funding from the federal government since the highest level since 1985. We saw the economy respond, and we also saw a cultural shift. Double-digit increases in the amount of men and young women going into the skilled trades as opposed to traditional 4-year collegiate institutions. Some of you guys may even remember the cultural shift. If you've watched HGTV in the 2010s, you remember that it was a lot about interior design. Some of the fixtures on HGTV were people like Genevieve Gorder, Candace Olson. But then there was a shift to reflect what was going on in the culture. We saw the emergence of people like Scott McGilvery. Now, I ain't gonna complain. I do not mind watching Scott McGilvery, y'all. Right? Jonathan and Drew, the Property Brothers. And we saw shows like Flip or Flop, where it became a little bit less about interior design, but more about the construction and the economic aspect of it. Why? To accommodate the cultural shift of more men entering the skilled trades and how they can become a new class of millionaire for HGTV's growing male audience. Now we see over 40% of HGTV viewers are male, and they're watching to learn about the money. Another cultural phenomenon creating competition for traditional private collegiate institutions is non-traditional education. Now, most of non-traditional education has been forged forward and been moved forward by for-profit colleges, offering online degrees, credit transfers, some of these for-profit programs that offer coding boot camps, and IT certifications for in-demand jobs. So we're now kind of seeing these traditional 4-year collegiate private institutions make way for state schools and for-profit colleges that create more accessible job training for adult learners. In fact, there have been some colleges where non-traditional students outnumber the traditional ones. So traditional collegiate educational institutions have really lagged behind in this area, and it has affected their bottom line. Now, of course, we do have to direct some attention to the video game playing unemployed or underemployed male population of the United States that are choosing not to participate in the economy. But really, this is one of the markets that the private collegiate 4-year institution is going to start to target. We also saw one of the biggest detractors from doing 4-year private traditional institutions was that of student loans. But now student loan repayment is becoming closer to a reality. It even was a presidential election platform. Ladies, you can't view this through the lens of the Black experience, but you have to look at this through the eyes of the majority culture. They don't just talk about problems. So remember, when the majority culture foresees a problem, it becomes a social discourse, systemic change, and a cultural shift. Even in my home state of Texas, I'm already starting to see systemic change. I've noticed Baylor University, a private traditional institution, offering more alternative work-life balance MBA programs. Rice University, another prestigious private traditional institution, is making national news and is really pushing advertising and marketing. And some of your very well-respected private four-year institutions are moving to different athletic conferences to improve their visibility to recruit male athletes. The majority culture will not take losing money in traditional private collegiate institutions or falling behind on the economy in order to spare men's feelings. Listen, the bottom line of the majority culture has always been money. So they don't shame their women for achieving. They don't embarrass their women for prioritizing work. What they do is will create more successful men and create more successful women that will then become successful couples. Because what successful couples make is money. And that is always the bottom line of the majority culture, making money. And as far as the men who were in the article, the Wall Street Journal article and in the Yahoo News article, how long do you think it'll take in a functioning patriarchy for men of the majority culture? Some manager is going to pull them aside and talk to them about a career in logistics or supply management chain. That's what functioning patriarchy does. Although it is very socially acceptable for the majority culture to throw other members of the majority culture into the trash, they're certainly not going to let 1 in 3 of the men of the majority culture not be employed full time. They're not going to create an impoverished generation of children. And even though there are women of the majority culture that I explained in my Kansas City Shuffle video who are kind of encouraging hypogamy and for women to date down, notice the women delivering that message don't live by that. Women are going to be smart enough to figure that out, and they're still going to be strategic and figure out how they can get in where they fit in. Ladies, this is the next step. So in light of all of this information, what's a Black woman to do? Well, maybe you can do like this Mocha Mommy subscriber who decided to ask about baseball tickets, seating, and key players, and found herself sitting amongst men who were passionate about real estate and having a great conversation and a good time. Or like this Mocha Mommy subscriber who decided to put her fear aside about scarcity mindsets, put up that online dating profile, and is now going on 4 months with her new boyfriend. Or you can do like this Mocha Mommy subscriber and who finally decided to take advantage of her company's alliance with the NFL, sit in the 10th row at the 50-yard line of the San Francisco 49ers versus Seattle Seahawks game and be able to engage with her male coworkers who never really got a chance to see her in a social setting. And now they're able to talk and have more of a social relationship more often. So ladies, you can choose to sit and ruminate on articles about an impending mating crisis in 2027, or you can choose to deploy strategy to get out there now. So what does this mean for strategic Black women? Well, strategic Black women are not bound by certain social norms that other populations are bound by. If we choose to be hypergamous, we're not confined to those who have only graduated traditional 4-year private collegiate institutions like some other demographics of women are. We can still be hypergamous, dating a non-traditional student, marrying someone in the skilled trades, taking someone who chose the entrepreneurial route as opposed to the traditional collegiate route, someone who might be have certifications as opposed to a degree. All of these things can still be achieved through hypergamy. Just because traditional private educational institutions are having a problem doesn't mean that it's your problem. So while I know that traditional four-year private collegiate institutions are having trouble finding men right now, I know that they will have a solution. And I also know that Black women who act strategically can still find hypergamous, fulfilling relationships. The question is, do you have a plan and strategy in place to make it happen? This is Mokomami, and I'll see you in the next video.